Hey,
Hello,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. So I just want to kick off talking about sometimes because that's really how you kicked off your career. Can you walk us through the process of writing it, producing it, and then releasing it? Since it was new to you, how did you navigate that?
Sure. I actually was not living in Los Angeles at the time. I was visiting with a friend, and we went to a couple different recording studios, partially just to kind of see, um, thinking forward in the future, what types of spaces we would be interested in utilizing for ourselves. What was feasible, because it's a lot more expensive in SoCal than in Sacramento. um, but we were there, and a friend of ours, actually two friends, Tommy Brown and Victoria Monet, they opened up their studio space to us, and we had it for basically 24 hours. And so I didn't really go into the studio with the intention of writing. Sometimes we just wanted to create something. So it was myself, my two friends, Buddy Bangs and Big Mike Hart, where Mike was kind of just sitting there playing some stuff on the guitar, and I had started writing out an idea, and I sang the first little bit of it, and I got to sometimes it hurts, and he was like, okay, well, let's go lay this down now. And so I finished writing it. We stayed up overnight in the studio, probably, I would say we were between the writing, the recording, and then kind of listening down to everything. It was probably a 14-hour thing. So it was one of those things where you start in the middle of the day, and the sun goes down, you're burning the midnight oil, and by the time we were finished, the sun was actually coming back up. So I like I said, we didn't plan on writing that song, but it was something that came together really well, very organically. And I just kind of pulled from different experiences, a bit of my own personal experiences, some experiences that I know others have gone through, whether, it's people that I do know or people that I know through other people, or examples you've seen on TV, but just things that are real life situations that happen to people. And for the context of that song, it really, sometimes it hurts, was just to say, when things don't go the way that you plan in love and relationships, sometimes you have to sit in that moment and not force yourself forward into a new relationship or kind of brush things under the rug and pretend like they didn't happen and act like you're fine. It's okay to live in that space and allow yourself to heal. So I can't say that, going into the session, I had this deep thought about oh my gosh, I have this cool concept that I really want to share with the world because this is on my heart, because it wasn't. But in retrospect, looking back, that was really the direction and the message. And I'm so glad that it came together as well as it did, because I feel that it is a song that resonates so well because it's so relatable.
Yeah, I agree. And so does everybody else because once that came out, you hit the ground running and you kept going and then creating new music and putting out new kind of ideas for people to listen to. So besides sometimes, since then, you've written and produced a ton of stuff. And I want to know, especially now during COVID and quarantine, how do you stay inspired? What inspires your music throughout the process and now especially?
Sure. Well, one thing that I can say has been really impactful in a positive way, has been, in spite of not being able to go out and about and participate in writing sessions and studio sessions where lots of people are there, because I am accustomed to being on the road so much. I have more free time to really zone in and focus on the creative side, because even though I was still writing and releasing music before, I had to juggle and kind of try to squeeze in the time to get the writing and the recording done as my schedule would allow. And so it definitely was an adjustment, to be at home so much, but at the same time, I had so much freedom and so much time. And, if I had an idea at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. or 4 a.m., I could just hop up. And thankfully, I am in a position to record remotely. So the majority of the music that has come out recently has been stuff that I recorded at home in studio. So yeah, it's definitely been a different time. But I welcome the free time that I have, not ever having a feeling that, I need to rush through something because there's this deadline that I'm just really racing to, really meet. And, let things inspire me. Sometimes, I might write down like a concept of something that I want to talk about, but more times than not, I'm sitting and I'm listening with the music and kind of feeling like, what does this music inspire me to talk about? And sometimes that does take, a little bit more time than others. So because I don't have to rush through things, I can say like the last, I would say 5 or 6 songs that I released, I've really been able to take my time with them and look at the adjustments that we've all had to make in the most positive way possible. Instead of looking at the things I don't get to do, I look at the things that I've gained as a result of, things changing so much so quickly.
Well, you're definitely right. The deadlines don't exist because I feel like time does not exist. Like in our reality right now, there's no start and stop. Even for people who have 9 to 5s, it's so hard because you're staying in your space. You're in your apartment, your house. So when do you get on to work? When do you get off of work? And unfortunately, I mean, with all those benefits of having so much room for creativity and no deadlines to just let thoughts flow in and out, the unfortunate side of that as a musician or a performer is that you can't perform right now in front of like live audiences. And I know for me, I was blown away to see like who you've performed with, what stages you've performed on. That is crazy. And so on my show, I love to kind of get like behind the scenes things from my guests. Is there anything you can tell me about like a tour you've been on with a fun person or a stage like Ellen or the Late Late Show? Any of those things that memories really stuck out to you?
I first have to say I'm so thankful that I can honestly say, without trying to cover anything up or dodge certain subject matters or incidents that might have happened, everyone that I've worked with up to this point in any capacity, whether it was like a one-off or a couple television performances or a big tour, everyone has been very kind. I was never in a position where I felt like, oh, well, I'm singing background, so they're treating me as such, and I feel insignificant, and it's very obvious that my place is here and their place is there. I felt very welcomed. Depending on who I was with, I was able to spend more time with some than others. So like, for instance, being on the Jonas Brothers tour, you don't really get to interact with everyone so much because there's so many things going on in any given day. And it's not as if everyone is always, at the venue all day long from the beginning of the day until the very last song, of the night. Oftentimes, people are leaving to do interviews and photo shoots and then running back, and maybe you see each other, crossing paths for lunch or dinner, even if you have a chance to have dinner before you go on. So on the bigger tours, you don't really get to spend as much time with everyone. I think the person that I have been able to interact with the most has been Eric Benet, partially because I toured with him the longest consistently, but also because I've done work with him outside of tour. I've done videos with him. And in general, he's just been extremely supportive of my music career. He'll call or text me and say, how are you doing? Or what are you working on? And let me hear something, and I'll send it and he'll give me his feedback. He shares a lot of my work online. And overall, he's a really good person. He's super talented. I know people know him for his voice and his songwriting, and he is great at those things. But to me, it matters so much more that he's such a great person. And I'm glad to not have only been able to perform with him, but to now know that he's a person that I can call a friend.
When you're touring with others and singing kind of backup, how do you manage like touring with them and being on their schedule, but also simultaneously creating and producing your own stuff on the side?
Well, specifically for the last tour that I was on, I have a great relationship with MXL Microphones. They're a company under Marshall Electronics. And so anytime I ever need anything from them, they're always a phone call or an email away. So I literally was able to get microphones for me, but also for my tour mates, which was awesome because anytime I can, I like to introduce people to new equipment that I feel like you guys should really be trying this because this is what I'm using. And also have a good relationship with Chaotica Eyeball. So between having the microphones that I needed and the Chaotica Eyeball, which is kind of what soundproofs the microphone when you're not in a soundproof room, I was able to set aside time basically on my off days where we're in a new city and most of the time people want to go out and, see what there is to see, which I love to do too, don't get me wrong. Like I definitely love sightseeing and doing all the very touristy things, but I used the majority of those days to write and to record because that's all that I had. To try to squeeze it into a day where there was also a show going on, it wouldn't have made sense. I maybe could have captured a few ideas, but when I have something that I want to work on, I don't like to have to break it up. Sometimes I know that's the only, feasible option, but more often than not, I like to know, okay, for the next 5 hours, for the next 6 hours, whatever it may be, this is what I can do. And I can use my time however I would like to as it pertains to what I'm working on and not feel like, okay, I have an hour here and then we have to get ready to go do this show. And then we have to do this interview and this radio appearance. So it was difficult because there is always so much going on and there's always so many moving parts. But because I had that mobile setup with me that I was lugging around in this like giant backpack, I was able to do it in between everything else. And then there were times where we had breaks that were like a little bit longer. So on any given week, typically we would have like maybe 1 or 2 off days that we wouldn't have to perform, even though we might have to travel to get to the next place, but we weren't technically performing those days each week. But sometimes there were times where maybe we had 7 days off because we were done with that leg of the tour. We were going to go to Mexico or to Europe or, whatever the case may have been. And that was a lot easier because then it's like, okay, now if I do want to just chill out a couple days, I can do that. And then go to the music the next couple days. But the reality of the situation was that more times than not, it was literally like, these are the only 2 days you have, make it work.
Yeah. And like managing not only that crazy hectic tour schedule for someone else, plus putting in your own work, writing, singing, producing. I want to talk about kind of switching gears a little bit because so much is going on there and you would think you're maxed out, but clearly you're not. So I want to know like what inspired you to start Decada Records and what does that name mean? Because it's so unique. I've never heard it before.
Sure. I got the name from a story that my parents told me about, being a little girl. And they said you were probably like, maybe 1.5, 2 years old. And you were trying to say your name. But for whatever reason, you could not say Jessica. You kept saying Decada, Decada, Decada. And they're like, what Decada? No, Decada. And they're like, oh, Jessica. Yeah, that's me. And since like I can really honestly say like music has been such a big part of who I am for such a long time, I would imagine that even though I don't have a memory of it now, I would imagine that at like 2 years old, I probably still had this huge love for music that I have now. And so I always thought, if I'm ever in a position, ever have an opportunity to really pursue forming my own label and really getting everything running the way I'd like to, I want to use that. Because it's such a fun story that my parents tell, and it's just cute, even for me thinking about it, like imagining myself, like you're trying to say your name and this is the best you got. But I think, just mostly because it's the best way that I can represent today, how big, music is for me, how long it's been a part of who I am ever since way, way, way back then when I couldn't even say my name.
So what do you hope to do with it? Like 5 years from now, what's the hope? What's the plan?
Sure. Well, I think for me, the biggest reason that I wanted to form a label is because I wanted to use all of my educational experiences and my professional experiences and really try to create something that was artist friendly in the sense of really working towards educating anyone involved about music as a business. Because I've seen it so many times, and even now I have friends who, you know, they'll reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, I just, you know, I signed this contract because I couldn't afford an attorney and I thought it was a good deal, but now I'm locked into this thing for 5 years and I'm only getting like 30%. I'm, you know, what should be like, you know, 80%, 90% coming to me. And I didn't look at it and I didn't know. And I was just so hungry for a deal. And it's like, I've seen it, and I do understand, you know, when you're super passionate about it and you feel like, oh, this might be my one shot, I just got to go for it. I know that the temptation is there to just say, well, I got to go for it and, you know, hope for the best. But the reality is, in this industry, those are the types of people who are the easiest prey. And so because I know so many talented people, and because it's really something that's near and dear to me, to be as helpful and of as much assistance as I can to other people, I really wanted to create something where if you're affiliated with Decada Records, you can rest assured that the information as far as, you know, setting up an LLC, if that's what you need to do, understanding royalties, understanding what a PRO is, understanding what a 360 deal is, understanding a joint venture, all of those things, they will know this, they will have this information, and they will never walk away and say, oh, I signed this terrible, terrible deal with Decada Records. Because myself, I have been presented with many, many opportunities from various labels and distributors. And fortunately for me, I do have a few entertainment attorney friends, but I also have two sisters who are attorneys. So I have always been in a position to reach out for the resource that I needed and never really rushed into anything. But I want to make sure that, you know, everyone that is affiliated has the opportunity to do things the right way. And because of having that background and that basis and that foundation, they're fully really able to reach their potential creatively, because the other stressors are not a factor. It's not, you know, I want to write this song today, but I'm stressing out because I know I got a bad deal, or because I know I recorded this album 2 years ago and it's still on the shelf and I don't know why. So it's, the main thing for me is just helping as many people as possible. And of course also releasing my music through the same channel as well. And, you know, paying homage to little Jessica who couldn't say her name.
Yeah. And like, I think what you said is perfect. You're kind of helping others, you know, be creative and reach their full potential by starting this, and helping yourself too, because it's a outlet for you. And I want to talk about what's happened just with you lately. You've had some awesome releases. You've had On a Break, In the Water, Hold Me Close, and your upcoming single, No Question. Talk to me about what you want listeners to kind of take away from that. What's the hope with your new kind of songs, and what's to come still? What's the vibe you want them to pick up from your music?
Well, I think two things. I think first and foremost, I want people to know, and we already touched on it a little bit, but I want people to know that all of that music was created remotely. And, you know, there were expenses involved when it, you know, comes to some production elements and mixing and mastering and distribution, just, you know, the basic things, but nowhere near what it would have cost for me to go to a bigger recording studio, to try to hire the most expensive engineers, and so on and so forth. So I want people to see, one, that, you know, if you really put your mind to it, even in the middle of a pandemic, you know, you can still get things done and work towards your goals. And also, I think the songs that I released most recently are a very good representation of my sound. I think people have heard different songs from me, some music that was released because it was specifically used for film or a television commercial. And so it wasn't necessarily a consistent sound. It was always me, and there were elements of me in each one, but maybe one was more adult contemporary, and one was more pop. One might have been, you know, more hip hop or R&B. And I think the last set of songs that I've released have a very consistent sound. They featured the things that I love to do most, lyrically and musically, when it comes to vocal arrangements and lots of harmonies and things like that. I think they are a very good representation. And not to say that, you know, I won't release something that is kind of like an oddball where it's like, oh, wow, that's really electronic and these sound more like this or that. But I think as maybe a reintroduction of who I am and the type of music that I make, I think that these songs are the best representation.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. You see that with a lot of artists. I mean, especially artists who start their career. It's very similar to what you're saying. You know, people can find you because they've heard your sound in, you know, a commercial or a show, and then they think that that's you, but it's not. So you have to really redefine yourself. And I think a good example of that on like a larger scale, just connecting it back to something you said earlier, Victoria Monet is closely connected to Ariana Grande, and she is like iconic for doing stuff like that, right? Because she was affiliated with like Nickelodeon and that kind of like kid vibe. And then she said, no, this is who I actually am. This is my actual sound. And now that she's become known for who she is, she can play around with that and throw those oddballs out and have those maybe more like techno or more like R&B or, you know, whatever sound she wants. So I think it's important for artists to define themselves that way, like how they want to be heard, especially when they're, you know, like you, who they already have the brand deals. They already have the, you know, person helping them find a sound, but that's not who they are. So that's great to hear that you are focused on that. And I'm sure people listening to these new sounds are really going to get that vibe from you, because if they love it when it was produced in lockdown, then they're definitely going to love it when it's produced out of lockdown.
Right. Well, that's the hope anyway.
Right. So you have so much stuff that's happened over the course of all of this craziness. That's amazing. But I'd love for you to share like some positive news in the world or in your life or in the music industry that we can all kind of look forward to.
Well, I can say professionally for sure, last year alone, I think I recorded like, I don't want to say exactly because I literally would have to count, but I would say like probably 60 to 70 songs. Just because there were so many days where I could do 2 or 3 songs at a time. So what I have scheduled right now is a single every month, but I also have some songs that I've set aside for a full project release. I'm just on the business side of things. We're still negotiating a couple different things because it's important to me. I totally get like, I've had so many people even as of late, like messaging me like, oh my gosh, I love these songs. Where's your album? Where's your album? Where's your album? And it's like, no, I know. I totally get it. And I appreciate that you've listened to the songs, whether they're the newest or my very first song or anywhere in between. But it's important to me, especially that because things are being released through my label, that everything that I put out has a fair shot to be heard. Because otherwise you're kind of doing, and that falls, I mean, that anything that you're doing falls under that category. So it's very universally applicable that, you know, if you're not giving it the best shot to be seen, to be heard, then it's kind of a hobby. And what I do is really the way that I live my life is all about and all through music. So it is my profession, it is my career. And I do want to do things to the best of my ability. So, you know, working on so many different things for marketing and promotion and taking meetings and taking phone calls, all that said to say that I have enough music to do that, just trying to get a few more things in place so that it actually makes sense and it has space to live and to breathe and for, you know, it to grow arms and legs and people that aren't even looking for me to find it and have, you know, a chance to decide if they like it or not.
So upcoming singles and potentially an upcoming album, that is huge, huge news. And hopefully 2021 is going to be a better year for everybody and you as well. And I have loved talking to you. And I would love for you to tell people where they can find you personally and listen to your music.
Sure. So first and foremost, my website is jessicajolia.com. All of the music that I have is available there for you to listen to, but all of my social links are there as well. But every social site that I'm on is just at Jessica Jolia. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that's my handle everywhere. Snapchat too. I'm not on as much, but that is my handle there too. And then Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, AudioMac, all of the digital distributors you can find, or digital platforms, I should say, you can find my music there as well.
That's awesome. Thank you so, so, so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.